Claire Ryan. I'm the coordinator of the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, and I will be your moderator for today. Just a brief introduction to the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. We are a regional network composed of diverse stakeholders with interest in invasive plants. These stakeholders make up both our membership and our board of directors and include researchers and educators, state agency representatives, representatives of the horticulture, nursery, and landscape industries, and land managers as well. Our mission as an organization is to reduce the impacts of invasive plants in the Midwest. The map on the right shows our primary geographic area of focus. The purple dots are the locations of MIPN's current board of directors, and the red star is our headquarters, which is just a little bit west of Chicago. We aim to accomplish our mission by synthesizing and sharing information and by developing resources and publications. Mark is going to be discussing some of our approaches and products as part of his presentation, and I'm really excited for you to learn more about our work. We're supported by a network of contributing members. If you're not already a MIPN member, I would urge you to consider it, as we have some great benefits, including conference and publication discounts. To learn more about that, please just visit mipn.org/join. We also have a large listserv to help with discussion and any announcements relative to invasive plant control. You can join our listserv whether or not you're a subscribing member. You would just send an email with your basic contact information to the address on the screen. It's mipn-subscribe@yahoogroups.com. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our partners. The U.S. Forest Service Northeastern Region is our primary funding partner for this webinar series, so thank you very much to them. Thank you to University of Wisconsin-Madison. Obviously, Dr. Renz is giving our talk today, but throughout the webinar series, we've had the benefit of using the Dr. Renz's lab's Adobe Connect service, which has really been helpful. And then finally, I want to acknowledge our partner, the Borden Arboretum, which provides MIPN's office space and internet connection and all that good stuff. I mentioned right at the beginning that this webinar is a part of a series. Our first 3 webinars were case studies looking at specific species and management problems. If you'd like to check them out, they're available now on YouTube. And you can also reach them from our website with that URL that's up there right now. So today we're going to be looking at a project that MIPN led with the goal of capturing and synthesizing a broad base of knowledge about what works and what doesn't work so well in regards to managing common invasive plants. This approach to seeking broad input is often called crowdsourcing. What MIPN has aimed to do with our database is not just use a large number of people for input, but also to specifically tap the expert knowledge of land managers who often have the most direct experience observing which treatments work and which don't, but who may have few opportunities to share those observations with their peers. Not to steal Mark's thunder at all, but he'll be giving examples of how land managers can get involved and help improve the control database. So I'm really excited for that opportunity as well. This is an increasingly popular approach. For example, the partners in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative are seeking to build regional information sharing collaboratives to help coordinate and improve the management of invasive species in the Great Lakes region. The Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative was the first formal GLRI collaborative, and it is currently seeking manager input for its adaptive management framework on Phragmites. So if that's a species you're actively managing in the Great Lakes Basin, I'd encourage you to check that out. Again, it's the Phragmites Adaptive Restoration Framework, so PAMF. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Renz. Mark is an associate professor and extension weed specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he specializes in researching and sharing information about the biology and management of invasive plants. Mark has over 15 years of experience with management of invasive plants throughout the U.S., in a wide range of habitats. His education efforts focus on providing technical information and educational opportunities for agency staff, consultants, private companies, and citizens concerned about invasive plants. Mark has been a vital player in MIPN's growth and development in recent years. He has served on MIPN's board of directors for 10 years and also serves as board president. So without further ado, I will hand it over.
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to continue talking about some of the efforts we have been doing here. This invasive plant control database was really a collaborative that started many years ago with a bunch of other individuals. Has been up and running since 2012. And I thought this would be a good opportunity just to give you kind of a history of why we created this and then talk a little bit about how we created it, give some examples of how to use it, and then ask for some assistance in how you yourselves can help contribute to this database and where we're going to go from here too. So a lot of stuff to cover, but hopefully we can get to it pretty quickly. As you can see, we have a wide range of species that are covered in here, and really kind of at the end of this, we're really going to ask for some of your help, and I think that's the key component. Before I get any further, I'd like to give some acknowledgments at the beginning, just in case I run short on time. I think the first acknowledgement that I'd like to give is to the founding members. I recognize Kate Howe, who was the former invasive MIPN coordinator, because she was instrumental in the development of several of these tools, including the invasive plant control database. And I'd also like to thank just people involved and affiliated with MIPN. You know, I always like to jokingly say that N is the most important letter in MIPN because that's the network, so that's all of you involved in being contributors to this, and we wouldn't be around without this network. Here's just an example of some of our fellow participants at our Upper Midwest Invasive Species Conference. I'd like to use this to give a shameless plug and a reminder for those of you interested in invasive species control, education, outreach data. We are going to be having the 2018 version of this conference in Rochester, Minnesota, so please visit the website and consider attending. It's going to be held in conjunction with NASMA. So really should be some just excellent presentations that are going to be there. So please attend if you're able to. Okay, so now a little bit of the history of what happened when I became president of MIPN in 2009. I thought, man, if I'm going to be running this ship, I better understand what our goals are. And so first thing I did was read the mission statement. And I got a little nervous because it was a pretty broad mission statement saying, MIPN's mission is to reduce the impact of invasive plant species in the Midwest. And that really caused me some pause that, man, this might be a pretty daunting task. But I think that the founding members of MIPN gave some really good specific goals and guidelines on how to approach this. And I'm going to talk about each of these guidelines in a little bit of detail just so you guys can understand what we've done and why we got to the point of having to develop this control database. So that first goal, as you can see, was really to develop prevention measures targeting the landscape industry. And I thought that, that was one of MIPN's first goals, and we were really effective in creating and reaching out to that industry and creating some great resources that really first led to the Landscape Alternatives brochure, which we published in 2010, and that later has evolved into the app, which can be downloaded on any of your various app stores, created in 2012 and updated in 2014. Really has been a good example of collaborative efforts between industry as well as MIPN. I think the good news is we have plans to update this into 2018 and beyond, so be looking for updated versions. And if you haven't done that, please check that out either by visiting the MIPN website or downloading the app on your tablet or iPhone or a smartphone. We also have been really active in promoting early detection and rapid response. Probably many of you hopefully have seen our guide to invasive plants of the Midwest. I'll be talking more about this later because it kind of was used to target which species we were going to collect and enter in the invasive plant control database. And also we have a wide range of flyers like the Keep a Lookout flyers that you see there too. So we've been pretty effective at promoting EDRR, and we've also been pretty effective at promoting reporting and data sharing through the Great Lakes Early Detection app. Various partners have been involved in that. As specifically like to acknowledge EdMaps, which is we now have it rolling over into EdMaps Midwest, which you can see has been really active, and we had a lot of contribution from many people on this webinar, as well as other partners throughout the state. The last issue that was set up in the framework that we wanted to do is we wanted MIPN to serve as a bridge between researchers and land managers. And I think this was another one of these things that we did a really good job initially developing and writing a survey and summarizing that sort of survey, which has been pretty actively cited in other research articles. And I think really the best way that we've served this goal has been through conversations and conferences at UMISC and our other invasive species conferences that we've held over the 10 plus years that MIPN has been present. So I think we've done a pretty good job of bridging this area. So kind of coming on, I saw that these were the main issues that had in place, and I kind of felt like we had good goals and projects in place for MIPN to address those goals. So kind of the question that I had when I came in to be president is I saw lots of projects in those areas. Is I thought, what does MIPN need to do next, and what are some of the next goals that we should look at? And it didn't take me long to get the ear of many stakeholders who kept saying, we need really detailed control information on these invasive plants because we really lack the ability to make these really high-level recommendations with all these details available. And I'll just give two examples of what some of the historical recommendations that are in place. One from our Wisconsin DNR about Tartarian honeysuckle, where it's just giving one-sentence summaries on control resources that are available and how to utilize those. Really lacking some of the detailed information involved. And not to be too critical, I myself have been equally as guilty creating herbicide effectiveness tables where we're just telling you this herbicide works best on this invasive plant species. Again, not really given enough level of detail for people to use that and go out into the field and implement some of those control strategies. So we really heard and understood that there was a need for this detailed control information, and it was lacking. So what did we do? Well, we got to work, wrote several grants to try and develop a resource that would fill that niche. And we were fortunate to get several grants that we were able to kind of combine into developing this MIPN control database, where we collected and summarized some of this control information. One of those grants was from the U.S. Forest Service State and Private Forestry Division, so we were thankful for that. And the other was money that came to UW-Madison through Senator Cole's office, so we want to acknowledge that money that came in that allowed us to create this control database. We used the MIPN field guide that you see here as a resource to inform which species we were going to enter into that database, and then collected that information. So this all occurred between 2009 and 2011. We received this funding, and we had some staff that was set to work on this task. Our goal was really to target mostly professionals and others that were asked to provide control recommendations, because we felt that while a lot of these professionals had really good detailed knowledge on one or two species, they may not know it on the wide range of species. And instead of having them have to sift through a bunch of internet searches and other fact sheets, we could provide some one-stop shopping by summarizing it there. And really the goal was to provide these detailed information that would allow people to directly implement those activities. One of the other goals was we felt that a lot of these recommendations really weren't that effective that people were giving, so to reduce the use of those recommendations and also inform people about recommendations that might be overly aggressive and we don't really want to recommend but have for some reason been overly recommended, or inform people about recommendations that have some pretty severe restrictions in place and give some guidance on where you should be using those techniques and how to use those correctly to avoid any environmental impact from those control methods. So what do I mean by overly aggressive? And I think this is a really good picture that shows this. This is a picture of multiflora rose in a pasture area that was controlled with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. And as you can see in this picture, we did a really good job at controlling that multiflora rose plant, but also you can see we also had a lot of off-target impacts of this species. In a lot of cases, those off-target impacts do extend over 1 year. This is a picture a year later, and what you can see is that underneath where we killed all that grass, we see other undesirable species like some biennial thistles and other undesirable annual weeds just popping up. So there are other recommendations that we could have provided that would have been just as effective and not had these off-target impacts too. And that's kind of what our goal, one of our goals were with this, developing this database. All right, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How was it developed? We hired staff to go out and collect and summarize what was known about control information. We looked in the scientific literature, but since some of these species were EDRR species, we didn't want to stop there. We also looked really closely at conference presentations and abstracts, got input from herbicide industry consultants and even land managers that we knew had really good data in the gray literature. Then we wanted to make sure and include this in this database. And we didn't just summarize the detailed control information, but we put some key attributes to this control information, like how effective it is in the season of application as well as the season after. Give detailed information on what time of the year you could use this. Is it a winter only, spring only, summer only application? What types of habitat could you use it in? And then finally, like what type of skill set is needed to use this type of management? So another way of saying that, can a novice who doesn't have a lot of skills in invasive plant management utilize this? Or do you need a high level of training to implement that technique? And as you'll see later, you can use those to customize what those reports are and how that information becomes available. So as you'll see, we did this on over 49 different species. So lots of time was dedicated into collecting and summarizing this information. The other key attribute that I like to emphasize is we wanted to make sure we had the information right. So this information was widely reviewed. We had 4 reviewers conduct reviews for accuracy on each species. So an incredible effort on the reviewers, and we'll thank them in a second. 2 of the reviewers were just editing for general comment, and we identified 2 as specialists for that target plant species, where their information was to ensure that we had all the detailed information available for those species. And until all that information was collected, we did not enter that data into the searchable database. So again, a key benefit, I think, that this information was validated quite a bit before being put up for display. And so at this point, I'd like to just stop and thank all of those. Maybe some of you are on this webinar for reviewing these fact sheets and getting this information out there. This could not have been done without your involvement. So again, a sincere thank you from me as well as others involved in MIPN and the MIPN control database. So which species do we have? Here's a brief list of the 49 species that are in our database. And what you see from this list is that we were really trying to target all those same species that were present in our field guide. We ran out of time and resources to do every single species, so we made the decision that we were going to preferentially research EDRR species over more common species, and species that we knew there were already really good resources available for control techniques we bypassed, wanting to make sure that we were collecting new information and summarizing new information. So species like Phragmites and Phalaris or reed canary grass are not in this database currently. We have hopes to get them in, but felt that there were other resources that already summarized it well, so we just skipped those just for the sake of time. So if you have interest in a species that's not in the database, let us know and we can put it on our list of species to add. So before I highlight and kind of go through a quick demonstration of how this database works, I want to emphasize this does not do everything, and there's two really specific things that this control database does not do. One, while it does summarize a range of common and effective control methods, it does not determine if that control method is suitable for use in your site. So there's other site-specific factors that might come into play to determine whether you should use a technique or combination of techniques or not. And this control database does not summarize that information, so you're going to need to decide that on your own. The second and more obvious one, but we like to always remind it, is this database does not provide you with a license or a permit to actually conduct that on your land. Different states and different regions have different restrictions for different methods, and you may be required to get a permit in order to conduct that. For example, in Wisconsin, many of our biological control agents have a permitting requirement that is required for them to be released within our states. And therefore, although we do give recommendations on effectiveness and how to utilize these biocontrol agents, you would still need to require a permit in order to release it. Burning is another example that a permit may be required to conduct a prescribed fire too. So again, check with your local resources and local affiliates to decide what type of permitting is required. Some other limitations that we just like to emphasize up front with this database is really the goal of this database is to look at effectiveness the year of treatment and the year after treatment. And often some of the methods that we have summarized in here don't show good results if conducted over 1 year's time, but those methods become much more effective if repeated over many years. And so take that into account when you're looking at some of these results. Great examples are grazing, prescribed fire, and again, the biological control agents often can take 4 to 5 years to see really dramatic effects. So while our ratings may be low in year 1 and year 2, they may actually be effective over the long term. The other the limitation that we like to emphasize is sometimes developing a management plan that integrates multiple techniques is going to yield the best results. And a great example is mowing incorporated with the use of a herbicide. Many other methods. This is not emphasized in the database because this is a challenge to summarize. But remember this when looking at some of these methods, because there may be an opportunity to integrate several control methods to improve your control. Okay, so now I'm going to shift gears and we're going to go to the web, and I'm going to actually show you and we'll run through a few examples on that database. First off, when you get to the database, you'll see we have the obligatory lawyer page, which is unfortunately required to kind of discuss. But if we get past that page and you click the Start Search Engine, it will pull up. And I just have to refresh this, excuse me. It will pull up. There we go. It will pull up step 1 if you scroll down here. Hopefully everyone can see that. And you can see that step 1 is to select the plant that you're interested in. And we have a really neat tool where you can just start typing in this box. Like I'm going to start typing garlic mustard. And you can see quickly that fills in with your selection. And you can just click search, select plant, and it will search. Now if I continue to scroll down, you'll see we have step 2, which is introducing search parameters. So what this simply does is allows you to customize what type of information you would like to see available to you. I'm going to skip this section and come back to it in a second, and we're just going to click Search Control Methods right here. So you can see we're going to list all the available control list options that are summarized in this database. And as you can see, you just need to scroll down and all that information comes up. You can see we have some plant identification information and ecological threats information summarized. You can click on those and you will see that information comes up, and you can see lots of detailed information. It's the same as on our field guide. So I'm not going to spend time on that. Same with the ecological threat information that you see there as well. We also have the opportunity to add case studies and for individuals and land managers to summarize case studies and their experiences. You can see with garlic mustard, we have no case studies that are entered and selected. I will discuss this at the end of my presentation. But if you scroll down, we can see that here is all this control information that is present. We have non-chemical control methods first, and then later we have chemical control information summarized. And what you can see, they come in a specific format. We give the type of control. In this case, it's mowing or prescribed burning. We give the user type selection. Is this a professional method or is this a novice method? And then we talk about effectiveness in control. We talk about effectiveness in season, and we talk about effectiveness the year after treatment. And we've just given it a star system. Basically, 4 stars is the best, 1 star is the worst. If you scroll back up to this search box, you'll see these I boxes, and you hover over those, and it gives you some more information on how we're rating that effectiveness, as you can see with both of those. And we'll talk more about those a little bit later. But as you can see in here, we're giving you very specific information in the description. We're saying mow as low as possible. We're saying when you want to mow before the emergence of flowers. We're giving you some level of control. It will be suppressed. Plants will resprout and still flower, so you need to monitor and repeat mowing to prevent seed production. So again, we're giving you some very detailed information. And then we're saying mowing will not eradicate first year plants as they resprout. And then we say, while mowing has been reported as an effective means of suppression, we don't know how long it's going to take to eradicate populations. So again, giving you very detailed information that you can utilize to move forward too. Again, other information, removal, manipulation of the environment, and so forth. I want to talk briefly about the herbicides because they're set up a little bit different. I'm going to go down to the most common herbicide which we would utilize, which would be glyphosate, which is Roundup would be one of the formulations. As you can see, we highlight the type of application. We can have a range of different foliar applications or types of herbicide applications. This is a foliar application. We give the user type and again the effectiveness in season and the year after. Many of you may be wondering, well, why is glyphosate not very effective the year after? Because we're getting new seedlings that are coming in the year after and re-establishing. That's why this is not as effective. When we talk about a herbicide, we focus on the active ingredient, and we do list some common product names. We do not list all of the product names because that would take hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars to continually update it. But we do give common rates that you would utilize if you broadcast or if you spot treat those applications. We also highlight the timing that's most effective to make those applications. We give some other remarks on timing that are important. And more importantly, we talk about cautionary statements. So in this case, we're saying use product label for aquatic use if the potential exists for the solution to contact water. We also talk about glyphosate is not selective, and if you drift on to desirable plants, you can see injury. So again, we're really trying to give you that detailed level of information that will allow you to give that correct to go straight out into the field and conduct management. And as you can see, we have a wide range of species and herbicides and other techniques in here. Unfortunately, we don't have all of these techniques or methods. And it's just really because we just don't have enough time to enter all of these, so we've really tried to focus on techniques that work well and or techniques that are likely to be used by our clientele, so are really common and widely available and sought to be searched out. But there are clearly gaps in this information that are available, and we really need to highlight some of those gaps. Now what I'd like to do is scroll back up to the top and show you some of these search parameters and how you can use these search parameters to really reduce the number of items that you're looking at. So one of the things we want to look at is, let's say I want to look at a method for controlling glyphosate. I am a novice. I'm going to need to reset this criteria. I am a novice. I want to do it in a forested area. And I want to do this work over winter time. I want to do it in the winter time. And I want to do something that has a decent level of control when I apply it. Now we're going to click here, and now we're only going to get responses that fit that criteria that we entered. So you can see I searched that, and now what we're really getting is two different types of control methods. We're getting a control method that we can manipulate the environment, and we're getting a method that we can apply glyphosate. So you can see this is a really useful tool that you can utilize to help really look at the condensed version of recommendations that you can that you would do depending upon site-specific or user-specific scenarios. So again, this is a really useful tool. We have gotten some feedback that a lot of professionals who are searching for recommendations are using this tool, and they've been frustrated because they've wanted to share the result with others through an internet link, and they haven't been able to. So I want to point out one of the neat function is that if we do any of these searches, we can simply highlight this link, copy it, put it in an email, and send it to someone, and they will get this exact same result that you see in your screen. So if you're one of those individuals that's often providing recommendations to others, this is an easy way that you can share this without having to do a screenshot or cut and paste it as well. So it's a really neat tool or resource that you can utilize. So we encourage you to utilize that so you can customize your information as it becomes available. I wanted to highlight another tool at the very bottom of every page is for a full listing of plants. If you click on this plant lookup in the lower right hand corner, what you will see is we have also provided a list of all the species we have in the database. And if this is a sortable list by common name and by scientific name, if you click on the tabs on the top of each column, and let's say we're interested in information on Asian bittersweet or Oriental bittersweet, we can click on that, and it will immediately take you to all the information that's available for that too. We did this for several reasons. One of the reasons we did this was, again, feedback that people want to send that full amount of data to people in an email. So again, you can send this link here to individuals and they will be able to view it. And the second reason is this helps search engines on the internet find us as a resource and recommend these pages for people to download as well too. So again, another fix that we've made to the MIPN control base to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So again, I would recommend that you use those links and send it out to individuals so that you can get more information. If you do have questions about what our criteria are for are you a novice, effectiveness, again, look at these I dots and hover over them, and that'll give you some of that key information as it becomes available.
Hey Mark, we did get a question asking actually what novice means in the context of the control database. Would that mean homeowners or just generally people who are new to control?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was really hard for us to label that. Essentially, we were trying to have that novice category be techniques that someone could do without having any training or permitting or required any permits. So any type of burning we didn't put as a novice treatment. Many of the biocontrol ones require permitting, so those have been put as professional. And as far as herbicides, we went like any herbicide that you could go to a garden center a Home Depot, Menards type of place, and purchase readily and easily would be under that setting. So again, it's a very arbitrary selection and criteria, but we're just trying to shorten that list because a lot of times people get pretty daunted at seeing this long list, particularly of herbicides that are available, and they're like, I just want to go spray some garlic mustard. Where am I going to be able to find oust? And so we wanted a way to reduce the number of options that they had to look for. So that was our thought process behind it.
And then there's another question. This is about chemical controls. Someone saw the abbreviation AI as active ingredient for glyphosate, and they're asking what the abbreviation AE stands for.
Oh, you guys are great. So AI is active ingredient. AE is acid equivalent. And this really gets into the details of herbicides. So some herbicides, so the active ingredient is the stuff inside the solution or the granule that is actually killing the plant. So for glyphosate, for Roundup, glyphosate is the active ingredient. Well, it turns out, this is the minutia of the data, is glyphosate, its active form is actually an acid. And different formulations will attach different cations to that acid. And so that changes the overall weight of that active ingredient. Again, lots of details here. And so and it's really the acid that's only what's killing the plant. So acid equivalent is the acid form, weight of the percentage of the acid form in the solution. So it's a more appropriate representation of active ingredient for herbicides that are only active in the acidic form. Super complicated. If people have questions, they can email me and I can go through more detail. And it only accounts for certain herbicides where it's the acid that's active. So what I want to do at the end is talk about these case studies, and this is really where we need your help. What you saw in the upper right-hand corner under each species is this little blurb that says add new user case studies. And one of the things we recognize is that these summaries that we've collected from the scientific literature and gray literature don't capture all of what's working. And there's people that have experiences out there, and we really want them to share those experiences with us. Because I think that'll help empower people making management decisions. And certain methods just require more of a story format versus an X, Y, and Z, just one or two sentences describing each of those. And so really this is where we're looking for some help from you guys. So we have the opportunity for you guys to share your information and results. What kind of information do we ask? We've tried to keep this as simple as possible. If you click on that button, we're essentially going to ask for information like, who are you? What you did? What are the treatment methods? And in those, we really want to emphasize to be as specific as possible. What did the infestation look like? How big was it? What time of the year did you apply? What was the plant growth stage? If it's a shrub, are we talking about big shrubs that are, 4-inch in diameter, or very small ones that are less than an inch? If you used a chemical, are we looking at what the chemical was, what was the percent active ingredient, product name, application rate, and details on the methods? And again, put enough detail so that someone could replicate exactly what you did. We then also ask about where you did this, the location and habitat type, so people can understand that. And then we want you to give some idea of how effective this treatment was. Typically we talk about percent control, but any type of assessment of effectiveness, we want to make sure you say it was effective at this time after treatment, and if you can kind of track it over several different time frames, that can really help to answer some of those questions. A great example is some of our techniques can work really well on perennials like Canada thistle, 1, 2, 3, 4 months after treatment, but really the litmus test is 1 year after treatment. So if you have that long-term data, it's really helpful to include that. So when someone includes something, it can look like this. This is an example on buckthorn where an individual did it talking about goats using for buckthorn. They talk about their treatment description, where they're utilizing this, and they're talking about some of their effectiveness. And they've included some really good information. It's maybe too small to see, but you can see that I conducted under a grant from SARE, and the goats average eating 300 square feet per goat per day. So that really gives you some good information on how many goats you would need to conduct it. And it gives really good information on when to do it, what the results would be, how long you need to do it to get control, etc. So we really would like to get more of these reports that come in. The process happens. There's a place where you submit this information. There is a validation process where we read through it, make sure that all the facts look like they're in line. We click a submit button, and then it's shown on this website too. So again, we encourage you to share your experiences here too. We really don't want this to be an onerous task. We really want it to be easy for you to share your information so it can help with the others. And where does this information pop up? It pops up right at the top when you do those searches, right before all those other control information that I shared with you. So this is why we need your help. We've been having this database since 2012, and to date we only have 5 case studies that have been submitted. Greg, Kim, Brandon, Christian, and Bill, thank you. Really helping us to help improve, share this information, but we need a lot more. We would love to do it ourselves and kind of contact others and summarize your information and write it up, but we just don't have the time and resources to do that. So this is where we're hoping you can carve a little bit of time out of your day to share some of this information for the network. Again, the N is the most important letter in MIPN. So I know that was a quick overview and I went through lots of details. I'd just like to talk briefly about the future of the MIPN control database. We're continuing to work on this. It's a challenge because this is a grant-based funding, and so as money becomes available and time and resources, we try and add some more. We've added a couple more species like Japanese barberry, cattails, and the Ottoman Russian olive to the database. Since its inception in 2011, but we really need to update some of this existing information because there's new information to add. We just don't have the funding available to update it. Fortunately, the Wisconsin Prescribed Fire Council did give us some funding to update some of the fire info in 2016, so we're seeing some of that information get put into the system. But it's just, to be honest, a challenge with finding continued support. We created this with grants. The money is gone from the grants, and we're just really struggling to find ways to move this project forward and to update this information. I think if you as stakeholders and partners are using this information, we would really like you to share with your colleagues that you're using this information and emphasize the importance of it. And we do have a grant that's out there right now to double the number of species and update the existing species. We're hopeful that we can get some more funding to improve this, but there have been some other options on how to move this forward that we've discussed. We really don't want to go to a user charge-based system because that will limit the amount of information that gets out there to the public, which is really the goal of this. But that has been something that's been discussed. I realize I'm talking way too much and I want to make sure and have time to answer your questions. So again, I'd like to thank all the partners involved in this. While we spent a lot of time updating this, there really is some need to get those case studies in. So we're really hopeful that we can get some contributions from individuals like yourself.
This is a great question, actually. I'm going to rephrase it just a tiny bit. When the database was built, did you consider adding like cost per acre treatment?
Yeah, it was something that did not come up, and it's a great idea. The challenge with that is a lot of those costs can be very specific to the situation. I'll give a great example. Let's say we're doing a manual removal of buckthorn in a forest. If there's one buckthorn or 1,000 per acre, that cost is going to vary tremendously. And so there's a lot of site-specific issues. To further complicate things, like with herbicides, believe it or not, some of these herbicides, the cost can vary quite a bit over time, depending on the type of product you use and other things. So it's a challenge to do it, to come up with a specific value, but maybe a thought that we might have as we move forward is to generalize that cost into a $1 sign through $5 signs. That might be a more appropriate avenue. The real struggle is that when someone asks me, how much does this treatment cost? I say, well, give me some details about your site, and then I can give you an estimate.
Yeah.
So great question, but it's really a challenge to come up with a specific value that isn't too general without you entering some site-specific details.
Probably a lot of variation as well, I would imagine, in labor costs, depending on if you have any volunteers who are able to help, or also depending on just where you are and what the kind of local economy is for trained folks.
Yeah, it actually brings up a good idea of another tool where it could be a cost calculator, where you ask a series of questions like density and other things, and as a result of that, you would get some estimates of what that cost would be. I think that would be really neat and could be utilized for cost share or other aspects too. But yeah, I think that would be the way to approach that the best, and I think getting a few key individuals together, we could probably create that tool relatively easily.
Okay, here's another question that's come in. This person says that they've been fighting garlic mustard on 240-acre forest in north central Indiana for at least 10 years, and that they have kept records and will share a case study, which is excellent. Thank you. I noticed a bug eating it last year, and we'll be working with Purdue if it's still there this season, maybe to identify the insect. Actually, we've had some news semi-recently on biocontrol for garlic mustard, that there is a potential biocontrol agent that's sort of working its way through the legal process, but I don't believe it's been released yet. Do you have anything other than that on?
Yeah, and Sarah, thanks for sharing that observation, and I'm glad to hear that you're working with Purdue so we can get that insect identified. There has been a lot of research on biological control with insects. They're bringing in, I believe there are several weevils that they have researched. They're from Europe. They've identified, and they're going through the process of getting approval for release in the United States. That has not occurred, but they have passed a very important obstacle. And yes, Sarah, that's right. It is University of Minnesota has been doing a lot of work on that as well. So it is not currently available in the United States, so I would bet a lot of money that's not the bug that's eating the garlic mustard. But the news I just heard is there's a pretty good chance that bug will be approved for release in Canada this year, or maybe in the following year too. So there is hope that this biocontrol insect will be available in the near future. When I first came to Wisconsin over 10 years ago, they kept saying in a year or two we're going to have this biocontrol insect, and here it's been 10 years and it still hasn't been released. So we just have to wait for those approvals to go through, but it looks like something's going to happen soon, Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah, that is the biocontrol agent being researched through University of Minnesota. Another question from John Lamp. Can species be suggested from any part of North America to add to the database?
Yeah, hi, John. Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is that while this is used, and we actually have data to show that this is actually used internationally, this database, really the main focus of MIPN is to serve the Midwest. So as long as the species is problematic in the Midwest, we would encourage including it in our proposal. I think, Claire, did we identify which 50 new species we were going to add? I think we have a list somewhere that we would be happy to share with others, but we'd love the input. The next step is we just need to get a funding source to move forward and start working on these.
So it would be unlikely that we would put a high priority, for example, on adding a tropical or subtropical species, but otherwise.
Unless they'll pay for me to go there in January.
Here's another question. Would we accept a case study from an area outside of the Midwest? And in this example, they said Kentucky.
Yeah, Karen, great question. I would definitely say that as long as you're, it would fit with those weed species or invasive plants that we have listed, absolutely. So if you're dealing with amber honeysuckle, you know, or I know we have like the honeysuckle vine, we have information on those. If you want to add a fact sheet about that, that would be great. Many of those techniques, I think if it's a species we don't have in the database, then obviously there's not a mechanism to share that, but we would welcome any of that information, absolutely.
And one other question, I'm not sure I understand this one. Any feedback from beekeepers? Would that be on the impacts of herbicide on bees, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, and so we haven't had any involvement. I see you're typing, so I'll wait to get some clarification, but beekeepers weren't involved in the process of creating this tool at all, so I don't think any of their input was put into the what we wrote and what we have summarized. If you have some concerns about some specific techniques used and how it's going to impact beekeepers, I think that there's some other resources. Oh yes. Yeah, so I see what Melville's question is a good one, and what that question is that some of these listed species, like a great example is the sweet clovers, are actually a source of a critical source of forage for bees. And so we're using, we're the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, and our goal is to prevent or reduce the impact of invasive plants in the Midwest. We acknowledge and realize that sometimes those invasive plants have values that are valuable for other individuals too. But as our society, we're most interested in preventing some of those impacts from occurring on the landscape. So we're not really touching on this, but Melville, you're right on, is that it's important. We need to have those discussions when we're talking about invasive plants, that there are benefits, and we need to communicate with some of the beekeepers that, yeah, there are benefits to you, but there's negative consequences to others as well. Beyond the scope of this control database, but clearly is something that we need to communicate to others.
All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. You had some great questions and great commentary, which we appreciate. And yeah, if any of you want to be our heroes and submit case studies, we'll be so excited to see those in and to review them. So with that, I'll sign off in just a moment here. Thank you, Mark, for your time today. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye now.